Hello, welcome to the Art of Immersion panel. This is organized by Jessica Angel and Art Project 2020 as part of the Vancouver Biennale. My name is Brian Droitcourt. I'll be moderating the panel. I'm an editor at Art in America magazine, where I run a weekly email newsletter about art and technology called The Program. Art in America is also a media partner of the Vancouver Biennale, and we will be streaming a video of this panel on our IGTV channel, so that should go up in a couple of days. I was really excited to get the invitation to moderate this conversation because I'm working on an upcoming issue about immersive art and mixed reality, so I hope you'll keep an eye out for that. It will be coming out in print and online in January. I just wanted to let you know there is a poll that we put together. It's going to be on the third tab at the right side of the video. I just wanted to get a sense of where people experience immersive art in VR. So you'll see the questions there. And I really appreciate it if you could say if you experience this mostly at home with your own VR headset, in a museum or a gallery, in a space dedicated to immersive artwork, such as something like Meow Wolf or Team Lab Borderless, or another space that is not really a conventional museum or gallery, or finally using an AR phone app. So we have some really great speakers today who are going to be talking about immersive art from a variety of perspectives, from creating, producing, presenting, and selling. First up, we're going to hear from Jessica Angel. She's a Brooklyn-based artist active in the movement to use blockchain technologies for the production and funding of ambitious art projects. One of these projects is her Voxel Bridge, a major public installation in Vancouver that's going to open this spring, and she'll be speaking about that now. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Brian. So maybe we can see the slides. I'd like to share some images of my past work and the work that I'll be doing with the Vancouver Biennale. So this is a video. If we could hit play on the video. We created with a team of architects a 3D model of the actual bridge. So this is a long underpass. It's about 180 meters long. We have 11 columns, and with adhesive vinyl, I'll be taking over the space to create this visual sort of immersion of what I would imagine the sort of blockchain space to be in this kind of chimerical imaginary world, if you could dive into this place. But I want to share a little bit about the process. So what you see here is a 3D model that was created using a cloud map, which is a tool. It's like a survey of laser points that give you an exact dimension of what the bridge is. And that's the process of creating these adhesive vinyls that match exactly the exact size of the bridge. And then using Rhinoceros and a plugin called Grasshopper, we created the projection over the 3D bridge. So it has like all these different layers. If we look at the other slides, perhaps before these, maybe if we go back, yes, exactly. You can see some of my past work that aims to create these immersive experiences that are entirely hand created. So I'm really interested in creating this sort of parallel between the virtual, what we believe to be virtual, which is like generally related to a computer, but the concept of virtual is something that goes beyond computers. Like if you are reading a book and then you go to a footnote that takes you to read another book, you're creating this sort of link. So there's this virtual space that is a sort of a collective knowledge that exists. So virtuality is not necessarily something that is connected to a computer. Just the computer makes it really easy for us to believe and see that virtuality. So I'm interested in by physical means. If we can look at the artwork, the other images, if you don't mind passing through the slides. By handmade, hand-cut adhesive vinyl, creating these environments that take you to the world of technology. So I do want to create this sort of parallel between virtual and physical by using my hands to make something that looks entirely virtual. So yeah, that dichotomy between virtual and physical, I'm interested in that and trying to bring it together and sort of show through my artwork that what is physical and virtual is actually kind of intertwined. So yeah, I can talk more about that later if you guys want to hear more. Brian, I think you're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Jessica. Our next speaker is Bernadine Brooker-Reeder. She is the CEO and co-founder of the Starry Group, an online platform that connects collectors and institutions for exhibition loans and tours. She's an advocate of technological innovation in the art world, and she'll be speaking about interactivity, immersive exhibitions, and digital experiences. Bernadine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Brian, for that great intro. And it's great to be on this panel. I know some of you. And thank you, Jessica, also for putting together such an amazing program. This is an amazing series of talks I've been following for the past few days. So I guess coming at this from my point of view, I would argue that exhibitions are kind of the original immersive experience. And when I'm talking about exhibitions specifically, we work with museums. So those are the exhibitions where you pay a ticket, you go in and you learn everything you want to learn about Leonardo da Vinci, about dinosaurs, about whatever it might be that you're interested in. And so in essence, traditionally, this is physical to physical content. It's physical content that you have in one museum that tours, or a private collection or whatever, and tours to a physical location. What we've seen on Vastari recently, actually, I'll talk about it in a second. What we've seen in Vastari recently is that you have digital content that is starting to be shown in a physical venue. That could be virtual reality work. It could be work that's supplemented by augmented reality, or also even image mapping and projections, where you have exhibitions that are being shown in a physical venue that have a digital source. And then what we've noticed during this year of 2020, when physical venues were less accessible, is that people are exploring the possibility of potentially touring digital content to digital venues. And that is conceptually a really interesting thing to think about what the spaces are where these exhibitions are seen. And so if we go to the next slide, I'll give you a bit of a few examples from our platform. I searched for immersive experiences. This is one experience coming from the Philharmonie de Paris. And it says immersive in the description, primarily because of its use of sound and the use of music. So it's quite interesting that traditionally in this exhibition, where you have wall labels, you have artifacts, you have this whole experience they've created, they're really thinking about sound as the thing that ties it together as an immersive experience. If we go to the next slide, this is actually going to play a video with some music. This is a virtual reality exhibition from a Parisian producer called Diversion Cinema that is actually emulating an ayahuasca experience. So you can actually put on a headset and feel what it's like in an abstract way to try ayahuasca. Now, this experience has been shown, we can pause the video there actually. This experience has been shown at film festivals. It's won awards at film festivals, and it's often considered a film, but it's being brought to Vastari, where we are touring exhibitions, if you go to the next slide, because of the fact that it's being shown in an immersive experience, even physically, right? So it's an immersive experience because you're using a virtual reality headset, but it's also put in a space that feels like you're in this shamanic circle with a kind of canopy, that you're even feeling the physicality of it that's different from if you were doing it, seeing it at home. And if we go to the next slide, we have an example of a conundrum that kind of exists with these exhibitions in the art world. If you look at this exhibition, it's from World Concert Artists. They're an exhibition producer, and this exhibition is available for people to hire. But a lot of times that gets tied to children's museums, because traditionally a lot of the immersive technology was used in exhibitions of children's content. And I think that's one of the issues that we have with immersive experiences, especially when it comes to image mapping and interactivity, elevating it to the point where it's seen as something that is in an art museum. If we go to the next slide, it's my last slide. This is actually from the Van Gogh Museum officially, so it's an official image mapping exhibition where you meet Vincent. And the experience was actually produced by the Van Gogh Museum because there was not a bootleg, but an unofficial version of Van Gogh's experience called Van Gogh Alive, touring around the world, produced by some Australians, that didn't include as much art historical content and story of his life. It was more of an experience in itself. And the museum felt that this technology should be used more in an art historical way. And I guess what's interesting there is you're talking about immersive experiences and what people think it should be versus shouldn't. So kind of trying to put it into these boxes of exhibitions for children's museums versus exhibitions for art museums versus exhibitions for venues that are more commercial, perhaps, like a shopping mall. So I guess that's the perspective I'm coming from when I look at the Art of Immersion. I'm really excited to see it transcend that border to being put into the realms of the art museum. And that's everything from me, I think.
Thanks so much, Bernadine. I think that is really fascinating how this technology is being employed in a lot of contexts, and art is just one of them, and there's so much crossover with other kinds of media and experiences. Our next speaker is Anne Bracegirdle. She is an independent consultant working on strategies for employing emerging technologies in the art world. And she'll be speaking about the growing popularity of immersive art experiences and how their business model is impacting the art market.
Thanks so much, Brian, and thank you, everyone. So I was most recently working at Superblue, the offshoot of Pace Gallery, building out an experiential art centers around the world. And what excited me about being there was related to my passion within the industry, which is about expanding the art world. So I'm most excited about making the industry more accessible, more transparent, more inclusive. And I firmly believe that experiential art and immersive art can help do that. And I'm just going to share some of the reasons why I'm so excited about the rise of this and why I think it holds such potential for the industry and for our artists. So following sort of Bernadine's questions about like interesting ideas for business models for how to make this work sort of enter the realms of the museum, I think what's super exciting is the potential for artists to get a portion of ticket sales in these spaces. So certainly, for instance, at Superblue, that is the business model. So creating an opportunity for artists to receive a portion of every single ticket sale. And I put up on the screen here some data related to Team Lab spaces, which, as you all know, is one of the sort of most successful experiential art collectives in the world. And if you see, it can provide like a really incredible revenue stream for artists. And it also provides an opportunity for these spaces to be leased. So, if, for instance, one of these Team Lab exhibitions was to be leased to, say, MoMA for a 6-month period of time, the artist could then continue to receive sort of royalty payments as it traveled there. So just thinking of more interesting ways for artists who create this large scale work to reap the benefits financially. And I also just sort of jotted down a few names of some more experiential art spaces that we're seeing pop up around the world, which is really exciting. And if we go to the next slide, something else that excites me about this work is the rise of experiential art for social impact and for fostering empathy and engagement and education. So up on the screen here, I've just brought up a few artists who I think are, particularly powerful and have the opportunity to also create sort of digital arms related to their physical works as we move forward and as, digital strategy becomes so important during these times. Risa Puno on the left is a Brooklyn-based artist who one of her coolest projects was an escape room about privilege. So a group entered the escape room, was divided into 2 separate groups, and one group had a distinct advantage over the other. And so when they came back to debrief, they had to just sort of address the differences in their experiences. And she's, so she really plays with sort of game theory to address social issues of our day. And Rafael Lozano Hemmer, you may know, is a Mexican-American artist who created an installation that connected 2 cities across the US-Mexico border. So these robotic searchlights were installed on both sides of the border that made bridges of light that opened sound channels for communication between 2 people on either side. So as someone turned a dial at one of these stations, their light sort of scanned the horizon and they connected with someone else across the border. And then they could speak to each other across. So if we want to go to the and then, well, yeah, I'm running out of time. Nick Cave was the third artist there that I wanted to mention, but we can move forward. And I think another thing that's interesting that we're seeing is the rise of increased institutional focus in supporting these artists. So Emerson Collective, which is a philanthropic organization founded by Lorraine Jobs, has recently partnered up with the Phi Studio in Montreal to have Alejandro Inarritu's Carne y Arena travel around the world. This VR experience is based on true accounts from Central American and Mexican refugees. And so this sort of global tour was just announced. And Emerson Collective funds initiatives that are specifically about driving social change. And then on the right, we see an Instagram post from Facebook's Artist in Residency program. And they, over the last year, commissioned 5 of their artists in residence to create murals to get out the vote for the American election. So I'm just excited to see all of this sort of support for mission-driven experiential art. And I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Anne. I went to Risa's escape room in New York last summer, and I was in the underprivileged group, and seeing the look on the faces of the privileged group when they realize what kind of advantages they have was like really, really amazing. So that kind of work, I think, does have a lot of impact to help people, be more empathetic and understanding. Our final presenter is Allegra Shorto. She is an art director at Cora Contemporary, an agency in Copenhagen that fosters collaborations between artists and VR developers. She is interested in how art institutions are working with VR. Allegra, go ahead.
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm so happy to be on this panel because honestly, it's a perspective I feel that is not given enough importance, is like the place that VR holds in institutions. And I feel like Jessica, Bernadine, and you bring that perspective forward in a really interesting way. Often people are curious about how VR art is, interesting in that it forces people to view art in a different way, perhaps in their homes, and this is actually arguably less interesting than understanding how we can build a ritual around VR in museums and, what VR's place is in art institutions. I think before I tell you more about Cora Contemporary, we can watch the video that we have a video that kind of gives you a little background information. I do find with this kind of work, it's easier to start with the imagery because trying to explain VR art to someone who hasn't experienced it before can be quite challenging. So there you get a sense of it. So basically, Cora Contemporary is a tech and art platform that acts as a bridge between virtual reality producers and artists. And we approach existing artists and invite them to create artworks using the technology. Their artistic concept is at the core of the process. We provide all the tools and then the artist leads the way. The company was established in 2016 in Copenhagen by 5 partners, and half of them come from a background in the arts and half of them come from a VR background. And our mission was and is to establish virtual reality as a widely applied medium within the arts. I think we were the first production company to focus on creating contemporary artworks in virtual reality. At the start, our idea was that with an entire in-house production team at our disposal, we could minimize the time between the conception of the artist's idea and the final realized project. What would take a freelance producer more than a year would take us a matter of months. And our team would have expertise in working with the artist and so translate the vision of the artist faithfully. And I think that we've been thinking a lot about distribution, as some of you have, and what the place of VR art is in museums. And I think COVID has definitely, this virus has definitely been an interesting accelerator for loads of the things that we've seen happening in the space, because obviously, museums are closed, museums are forced to find digital solutions to the lack of access. And it's been interesting to see how VR is suddenly becoming a lot more widely accepted, and people are, considering it and how it can be used in a way to expand their audience.
Great, thank you for that, Allegra. I'm just looking at the results of the poll we put up, and 50% of people said that they most commonly experienced immersive art in a museum or gallery, compared to 30% on a phone app, or 10% each at home or in a specialized space. So I think the work that you're doing is really important, because museums and galleries are where a lot of people get their first introduction to VR. Of course, with the caveat that I think because we are speaking to a specialized art audience, the results might be different if we've had a broader segment that says, and showed a lot, like millions of people are going and seeing these things at places like Team Lab and Wolf and so on. Well, thanks for those presentations. We had a really interesting question from the audience. Someone asked that hopefully coming out of COVID at some point in 2021, many of us will be eager to be around both more people and more art IRL. Do immersive virtual and mixed reality art experiences bring us closer together or further distance us? What are your thoughts on that? And maybe you'd like to start, because you were showing some of those examples of these socially engaged immersive projects.
Sure. I was about to say we should probably take a poll among the team here, and I'm sure we would all enthusiastically, yes, it absolutely has an opportunity to bring people closer together, just because you can fully immerse yourself in a sense of the other, right? I mean, we're thinking about an ideal way to foster empathy and to, by literal, like what better way to immerse myself? How could I otherwise understand what it was like to be, a Mexican refugee at the border than by experiencing this in virtual reality, right? Like, it's just, especially now, I mean, I feel like what better time to really bring that medium to the forefront and help people understand, just again, to foster compassion in the world.
I think maybe also there's something to be said about the user experience of these immersive pieces, because a lot of times the vision that people have is of someone just wearing a headset inside of a gallery, but you get to that headset in a certain way and you leave it in a certain way, and it's a whole woven experience that can be very social, even if you have 20 minutes of immersion, right? So Marshmallow Laser Feast, when they were at the Saatchi Gallery, you could smell a lot of the experience already, hear some of it already, see some of it already when you're walking in. You then go into the experience, and it's multiplayer, so you can see the other people in the experience. And then when you leave, you actually have the kind of outro of finding out what other people thought of it, talking about it. So it's not only about that bit where you're in the VR, I guess I would say.
I'd like to add to the question. I'm kind of approaching the concept of immersiveness from a almost non-technical aspect, and that is the reason why I kind of want to bring like the hands, the tools, and these kind of like really physical elements to create that same experience. Because for this question, I would say that I feel a little bit afraid that with so many virtual capabilities, we do lose some touch with like nature, in the sense like the physical nature of things. Somebody in the talks was saying like the road to hell is paved with good intentions or something. And I think we do have great intentions about exploring the technology, but I do feel, and even with COVID, seeing how much we're immersed in our computers, I've come to realize now that I want to go out more to nature, to like get out of this and like really not fall in that rabbit hole of hyper technology. So I do believe that it may have a little bit of an edge where it could be sort of dangerous to really lose sight of the physical world and just immerse completely. So that's why I tend to do these installations. And people ask me, why don't you do a virtual reality? Why do you have to go through all the work and go around the walls and put it if you could just create an experience that is easier to make, and more immediate? But I do want to kind of foster the connection with the physical and not entirely dive into this like virtuality.
It's interesting you say that, Jessica, because I see virtual reality as a world completely apart from our world. And sometimes when we give the technology to artists and we say, create whatever, we find that a lot of artists mimic reality in a lot of ways and create, parameters for themselves that don't need to exist in virtual spaces. And it's kind of funny because our brain can only go so abstract so quickly. We can only do it incrementally. Abstraction happens progressively over time, and people can almost allow their imaginations to become more and more wild. But the beauty of it is that it is completely different from reality, and that's why it's so interesting when you give it to artists and they can create entire worlds. It's like it's like the pushing to the ultimate limit what we, how we, creativity, I suppose. It's a tool that allows immersion like never before.
Yeah, I just add that it seems to me like a lot of VR art projects are like made by artists are sort of coming out of this orientation toward the individual experience of art, which can be atomizing. But a lot of VR artists I've talked to say that they might have come to this through video art, but since a lot of VR development engines are used for gaming, they end up making games, which tend to be more interactive. And I think that the art world has a lot to learn from these games. If you think of something like Pokemon Go, I mean, that was a way that brought people together socially, brought them outside, interacting with both the virtual world and the physical world. So I think that could be a really interesting direction for these experiences.
There was a talk we did, it's called Tour Through the Metaverse, and you can check it out, I think, in the program and review it. They were talking about one of the challenges these virtual spaces have is precisely what you're mentioning, is the inhabiting these spaces. These virtual spaces are so empty. There's such emptiness, and you're by yourself, and maybe you can connect with people. But I think the next step for the metaverse, for these virtual spaces that are interconnected, is really fostering participation inside of them. There really isn't there any yet.
Yeah. This sort of brings up a question that Bernadine, your presentation brought up. I mean, I'm interested in what you're saying about the association of interactivity with science museums and children's museums. And, there are so many forms of knowledge and culture that employ immersion, like, from video games to haunted houses to 3D cinema. So I'm just wondering what is at stake in claiming this territory for fine art? Like, why is that so important?
Yeah, I talked to a lot of museums that are worried about this technology. And I once was at a conference watching a presentation from a VR producer where a very well-known museum director was sitting next to me and said, this is like Amazon presenting at a conference of booksellers. We shouldn't have these big guys coming in with their technology and all of this stuff when we're about the real, the knowledge, the offline stuff. And I think that if museums don't get involved in this conversation, it's going to happen outside. And what I think is happening a lot of the time is that you have these experiences happening outside of the museum that are attracting the types of numbers that Anne is describing. And they are part of our common culture. They are part of the discourse, but museums are not owning up to getting involved in that conversation. So a lot of our time is actually spent making them aware of the importance of these things as artifacts and as part of what we are all talking about. And I think there's this weird thing about kind of the aesthetic experience as something that is uninterrupted, which is, it's almost like you're supposed to be far away from it, don't touch it, don't interact with it, don't do anything. And I mean, everything from the works that Allegra is talking about to the works that Jessica are talking about, they're both talking about works that make you interact with it. And that is a deeper experience than standing 2 meters away in a museum and looking at a work just with your eyes. So I think, yeah, it's something that makes people feel uncomfortable, but is actually quite exciting.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone else like to speak to this topic?
I think it was interesting, Bunny, what you were saying about museums. They need to involve themselves at this stage because we are in the kind of Wild West moment of virtual space. I mean, if you think about it, you can hijack any space, be it outdoor, indoor, and set up an exhibition in the form of AR. You can literally, well, actually, the Serpentine in London, for example, have these AR tours through Hyde Park where they're located. And it's kind of extraordinary because I don't know how permissions work, but basically you can go with your phone, you follow, and there is an exhibition happening in the park. And I guess that, at this moment where no parameters exist about, ownership of virtual space and how artists can create spaces in any location whatsoever, it is the moment where our institution should come in, or any kind of institution should come in and help build the parameters in line with what people want. And also, I guess what I'm trying to say is it would be nice for art institutions to be involved in helping to build the parameters.
Yeah, and I think
in interesting ways.
That framing is exactly what museums do. They kind of put in the context of why is this important, why is this interesting? And I've spoken to artists who are maybe not happy with the way that some of their digital artwork is shown in VR spaces, or that the way that it's framed or the resolution isn't quite the right quality. And I think that is part of the conversation too, is about making sure that people know what the space should be like for the work to be shown, and what are the parameters.
Yeah, and also until the price point for VR headsets goes down, I think museums will continue to be the place where a lot of people encounter this, and so that's another way in which museums can really influence the way that people understand VR, how it's used, what it's for, and so on. So I know a lot of the conversations at our Project 2020 have had to do with blockchain, and this is a little bit of a different topic, but I know that a lot of you are really invested in blockchain. I know, Jessica, you work with it as a funding model, and Bernadine and Anne, you were organizing the Christie Summit on art and tech and blockchain. So where do blockchain and immersion intersect? Is it a funding model for producing these big projects? Is it a way for people to have ownership in a larger immersion project? And what would someone get out of that kind of ownership?
I could add to that. There is a breakthrough, I think, when it comes to virtual space and the connection with blockchain, in the sense that for the first time, these spaces can be also transacted and they can be owned, and I can have a parcel that belongs to me and fill it up with art. And at the same time, this art is also scarce, and I own the art as well, and I can create 3D objects that I own through blockchain technology. So I become the owner of all these virtual objects, and at the same time, I'm the owner of the space where the virtual objects are taking place. So if we see a future, this kind of dystopian future that I was telling you that could be a little bit scary, is that everything, our relationship to objects and our relationship to the things that we own, is kind of what defines us, in the sense that I live here, I have these things, this is where my life takes place, my relationship with my things. Once we can have this relationship with objects and the ownership of the objects in the virtual and space, and that same relationship inside this virtual space that I own, that's when we actually can detach from reality and literally live in a completely, world of virtual space. If it's not with blockchain, you could not make that disconnect, I believe. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's interesting. Where my mind went with that is kind of about this. A lot of the conversations I have about exhibitions and about immersive art, etc., is about the experience economy that also groups it with concerts and with other experiences. And yet art historically has even though exhibitions are ticketed experiences, they have been kind of disconnected from the experience economy. So suddenly it could be part of like owning the experience rather than just being, I don't know. I think there's a bit of a duality of like art as something you have to own. Like it didn't always have to be that way.
Yes. Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah, and I invite people interested in that intersection to explore these virtual spaces that are linked to blockchain, where people have these galleries and they build in these spaces, and it's filled with super fabulous art.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I get really excited thinking about the incorporating blockchain in a sort of gamification way,
Exactly.
right? Like just as you said, Pokemon Go. Like I even think about how I keep referencing Team Lab, but their app allows you to be in their space and collect certain objects, right? Like you find it's like a scavenger hunt, right? Or like thinking about making Risa Puno's escape room and thinking of a VR version of that, where everyone has incentives to collect, et cetera, et cetera. You know, turning these little objects and collectibles into NFTs and kicking back funds to the artists or to, choose X charity or local community of your choice. I feel personally like very excited about incorporating the gaming element and with blockchain to give like all sorts of new, interesting like revenue options for artists.
There is a lot more to talk about here, but unfortunately we are running out of time. Thank you all so much for these great presentations and for sharing your thoughts. And Jessica, thank you again for putting this program together. So I hope everyone has a great day and you enjoy the rest of our Project 2020.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.